Look, I'm involved with politics because I want to deal with real things. I'm involved with philosophy because I want to deal with real things. In the English language, the word semantics has taken on a negative, dismissive, contemptuous quality. People say, oh, this is just about semantics. Look, I don't want to argue about semantics. And in a sense, we all know what they mean. I don't want to just quibble about the meaning of a word. I don't want to get stuck on this. Even though for many of the political and philosophical problems we may want to engage with, there may be a necessary preliminary stage of the discussion where we have to agree on the meanings of terms. Do you support intervention in Cambodia in order to establish a working democracy? How do you define intervention? How do you define democracy? Especially in terms of their border with Vietnam, how do you define Cambodia? There may be some, the devil may be in the details in terms of the definitions of words when we first sit down to discuss these things. On a deeper level, in ways seen and unseen, the definitions of words inform the ethical decisions we make, how we perceive a moral problem, or whether we fail to perceive a moral problem as existing at all. Most people watching this video grew up buying cow milk in a glass jar. And you probably grew up being taught that it was really morally significant to take the time to wash the glass container and place it in a recycling bin. That this was morally significant. This was ethically good. And of course, it's ecologically significant. And you were not taught to question at all what the white substance was inside the glass jar, whether it was milk or yogurt. You weren't taught to question ethically the meat and dairy industry. And at some point in your life, you start asking those questions. When you challenge the status quo on a deep level, linguistically and culturally, people assume you're challenging it on the basis of a belief. It's very easy to say. It's very easy to slip into the tradition of saying, I believe in veganism. But there's also a sense in which, without dwelling on semantics, we have to clarify or we have to point out, veganism is not a belief. Veganism is not something I can lose my faith in because it isn't a faith to begin with. Unencumbered by faith, unencumbered by belief, unencumbered by any kind of cultural tradition or set of assumptions, I can stand in a grassy field and look at a cow grazing in the grass. And I can recognize the absurdity, the absolute absurdity of a human being getting down on their hands and knees, shimmying across the grass, wiggling through a mud puddle, and then trying to suck the milk out of that cow's udder. What could be more absurd? And yet it's precisely through cultural accretion, it's precisely through layers on layers of belief, of faith, that we come to regard the milk in a glass bottle as something necessary, normal, and natural. Even as a positive part of our civilization and our cultural identity. Certainly still today, people in New Zealand, I think the Dutch and the French, but maybe especially the people in New Zealand, they're proud of their local dairy products, proud to export their butter, proud of their local cheese, so on and so forth, right? And yet if you just place it in this context, this microcosm, this really small-scale example of saying, would you yourself get down on your hands and knees, go across the grass, and suck the milk out of that cow's udder? They'd say, no, that's ridiculous. If someone else did it, you watched them do it, what would you think? You'd say, that's absurd, that's ridiculous. If someone else did it, and then they put the milk in a glass bottle and they hand it to you, would you drink it? They do that every day. So how can this make sense if you're just removed from this same moral decision, this same ethical absurdity by a few steps of estrangement, right? As the microcosm. When you scale it up, I just heard a new report. I can give a link below this video. I gave the link on Patreon already. A guy went through and did the math and looked more carefully than ever before at the ecological damage done by the meat and dairy industries, and compared it to the damage done by soy milk, production of equivalent vegan foods, like taking soybeans, turning them into soy milk, because it also does some ecological harm, but it does dramatically less. And among the factoids he puts out, he came to the number 73%. What does this 73% mean? The amount of land that we need to support and sustain human civilization, the land use we require, could be reduced by 73% if the whole human species were to start being vegan. Well, the point here is not that it's unlikely or improbable for the whole world to become vegan. The point is, again, you scale that up, you look at the irrationality of it. The irrationality of the one person on the grass drinking out of the cow's udder, the irrationality of 1 million people, of 1 billion people drinking cow milk out of a glass bottle, and so on and so forth. The ecological devastation, the cost of this. What do I have to believe in? What faith do I have to come to the subjective judgment that there must be a better way? Right? Questions of better and worse don't require you to have faith in anything. I can stand in front of a painting and say this painting is better than that painting over there. Right? It doesn't mean I believe in a heaven that the paintings go to after they die, where there's a divine judge who decides which painting is really good and which one is just kind of mediocre. It doesn't mean that I believe there's any objective standard existing anywhere, that there's a transcendent morality, that there's a fixed objective reality to good and evil on this earth, under the earth, floating in the sky, created by a god, or what have you. All right? We can be aware that our subjective judgments of this painting are merely that. They're our own subjective values. We can be aware that the value of the painting, if it's worth $1 million, is the product of 1,000 different people, each having their own subjective judgment, or coming together. A cultural convention. Think about the meaning of the word convention. A convention is people coming together. We still use the word. You can have a cultural convention where we decide, directly and indirectly, this painting is something that has tremendous value. And all these things are subjective. There is no objective measure for what's a good or a bad painting. But I'm not going to stand back and say, oh, who am I to judge? If I'm a nihilist, if I don't believe in these things, I don't have faith, who am I to dare to have opinion about what is a good or a bad painting? Okay? What do I have to believe in to be vegan? The answer is absolutely nothing. And I'm going to take a next step here and tell you sincerely, it's better for you, it's better for us, it's better for the movement, it's better for everyone if you can be vegan, believing absolutely nothing. If you can take up this cause with no basis in faith or belief. And I know that you may have grown up thinking that all good things begin with belief and that belief is necessary for every great and moral undertaking, but it's not. I'm making this video because an old colleague in the vegan movement has gone back to eating meat. And she went back to eating meat after losing her faith in a particular religion, a mainstream religion not so different from Catholicism or Judaism. That religion does have some cult-like aspects. Most of them do, especially if you're an atheist or a nihilist looking at it from the outside. It's easier for an outsider to see what's cult-like about it. And I understand her reason for giving up veganism is not that the veganism was a side effect of her faith, which it might be for a Buddhist. For a Buddhist, for example, they might believe in reincarnation, and then they become vegan because they see in the cows and the sheep and the pigs reincarnated people, and vice versa, that people have been reincarnated from cows and sheep and pigs. This idea existed in ancient Greece and ancient Rome with no connection to Buddhism. Obviously, in the world today, Buddhism is probably the major voice for this belief. Some Hindus also have this kind of belief in reincarnation, and they may become vegetarian or vegan for that reason. But then if they lose faith in that, they'll go back to eating meat because their engagement with veganism is based on belief and mine is not. So for this particular woman, she lost her faith in religion. And what she saw in veganism were the same problems, the same flaws, the same shortcomings that she had just recently started to criticize in religion itself. She saw veganism as a faith-based movement, proselytizing, trying to convince others to share in its own moral standards. I can sympathize. She has a point, but I think she's dead wrong. The problem of veganism is ultimately that it isn't just a lifestyle choice. It isn't just an ethic I can engage in for my own health, for my own ethics, for my own ecology. The concept of my own ecology is already surreal, right? And in this one sense, I'd like to answer, this problem by pointing to a comparison with speed limits. It can't possibly be sufficient for me to decide to just drive my own car more slowly. And conversely, if I have this belief, if I have this idea that I want everyone to drive their car more slowly, maybe for public safety, maybe for ecology, maybe for other reasons, I look around and I think, what I really want is to have a little metal sign by the side of the road with a 2-digit number painted on it, and have everyone do what I'm doing. I don't just want to drive more slowly myself. I want all of society to recognize this value. Is that going to be based on the belief that speed limits are objectively real? No. It's not that there's an angel in heaven that came up with the number 65 and said 65 miles per hour has to be the limit. It's not that there's any objective scientific fact I can reach for. It's not that there's an objectively real value under the earth or in the sky, created outside of human perception. Just as subjectively as I can look at a painting on the wall and give it a rating between 1 and 100, I can look at a stretch of highway and try to assign it a speed limit from 0 to 100. To some extent, I can be completely aware that this is subjective. I can be aware that it's intersubjective, that other people are going to have their own subjective opinions, and I can be aware that it's a convention. Again, a cultural convention, or a convention in the more literal sense, that we're going to have a conference. We're going to invite 100 different experts to come and talk about what the speed limit should be on different roads, and then we're going to fix them for everyone to obey. Okay? I understand the way in which this particular person looks at veganism and sees it as a religious mission trying to convert others to its faith, right? But veganism does not rely on faith. And again, it should not and ought not rely on faith. Because if your veganism is based on faith in these things, then your veganism will collapse along with your faith in those other things. Veganism can proceed just as rationally and openly and with as much critical thinking and dissent and what have you. It can proceed just as nihilistically as the man standing in that field who sees the cow and thinks, how can we justify getting down on our hands and knees? It can proceed just as openly and rationally and scientifically and nihilistically as looking at the knock-on consequences for how much land we're using, how much water we're using, those ecological impacts, and say, there's got to be a better way. And we can proceed in the same way in the pursuit of social change, in the pursuit of bringing over others to our side, as someone who says, look, for all these reasons, ethics, ecology, human health and safety, there's got to be a better way to organize our society. And guys, it's not enough for me personally to live in this ethically superior way. It's not enough for me to just drive below the speed limits. We've got to come together, agree to a standard and set up a system so that all of us can obey these speed limits. The same way that we've come together as society and decided, hey, you know what? It's not enough for me to quit smoking. We want everyone to quit smoking. We want the next generation, for fewer people or possibly nobody, to start smoking. In this way, there's an ongoing pursuit of cultural change that we can all be engaged in. But is veganism a religion? Is veganism just another faith that should be criticized and rejected because it rests on belief? My answer to that is no. And moreover, if you have become vegan because of a belief in something supernatural, like reincarnation, or something your yoga teacher taught you, or what have you, I think it's fair to say that you're now in the difficult position of having come to the correct conclusion from a false premise. And you're going to face a real challenge. I guess it's easier to go from doing the right thing for the wrong reasons to doing the right thing for the right reasons. That's probably an easier transition to make. But the role of faith in human psychology is so powerful that it seems to me when people are doing the right things for the wrong reasons, as soon as they stop believing in heaven, in life after death, in reincarnation, they go from a state of doing the right things for the wrong reasons to having no interest in doing the right thing at all. That's not what nihilism is. That's not what nihilism means. What nihilism means is that we're aware that concepts of good and evil and better and worse are subjective, that they begin with me, in the same way that a painter sits down and makes a painting starting with a blank canvas. Those values aren't something that exists in a real, objective, fixed form in the outside world for me to discover. There's something for me to create. They're a form of self-expression. And maybe I can find other people who share my values or think I have a good idea. Maybe I can find other people who think having a 65 mile per hour speed limit, having a speed limit on the side of the road is going to save lives, is going to be a great idea. Even though we've inherited this language, we've inherited these cultural traditions such that, we speak in terms of, do you believe in speed limits? I understand that's our normal way of expressing ourselves. But there's a very meaningful, very important sense in which speed limits have nothing whatsoever to do with faith or belief, and there's no reason why a nihilist would reject speed limits. There's no conflict between the two. There's a very real sense in which faith in veganism or belief in veganism is a very misleading construction of the problem. The point is, we're people who, for whatever reason, can't believe in the excuses made for carnism any longer. We can't believe in the cultural traditions, values, or beliefs that taught us that drinking the milk out of that bottle is something natural, necessary, and normal. And as soon as you start questioning that, this great horizon opens up to us, where you're looking ahead to the next 300 years and saying, what is the potential for human cultural change? As soon as we shrug off our attachment to these traditions.